Alright, I thought we'd start off by bringing you over here to the table saw and showing you that if your table saw is set up properly, or if it's designed properly, then the trunnion will allow the blade to tilt so that it's concentric with the top of the table. So what I'm going to do, I started off by putting a piece of wood here and putting my fence next to it, and I'm going to tilt the blade. And when we tilt the blade, and I've not got the best tilt mechanism on this saw, I think I need to get a little bit of oil on it, so it might wobble a little bit while I'm doing this. But I'm going to tilt it all the way down to 45 degrees. And there's against the 45 degree stop. And if you look, and I'll bring you over to the left just a little bit, if you look right where the blade and the wood meet, you'll see that they're still touching. So when you tilt the blade, where the blade intersects the table, that distance does not change. All right? So that's the first thing we've got to make sure of when we're making bevel cuts. Alright, hopefully you can see this a little better. We're set up now, and we're going to assume now that we're going to make a bevel cut. So we're going to make a bevel on this edge. This is the table of the table saw, and your blade will come up through here. One of the things you need to always make sure of is when you're making a bevel cut, that the blade tilts away from the fence. So our fence is going to be right here. And the reason that is, here's the fence. If you try to tilt the blade toward the fence, if the blade gets at a bond, there's only one place for the wood to go, and that's back at you. But if you tilt the blade away from the fence, there's two directions for the wood to go if something happens. The easiest one is straight up, and that's usually what will happen, and then the other way is back at you. So always tilt the blade away from the fence. Now, how to set this distance. If you want, let's say, a 3-inch cut with a 45 degree bevel, so from vertical here, this angle is going to be 45. Also turns out that this angle is going to be 45, and that sets us up a special kind of triangle, right triangle here. There's a right angle here. So if we look at this triangle, one of the things we find out, and I know this triangle isn't drawn exactly right, but if this is 45 and this angle's 45, then this leg and this leg are the same length. So let's assume for a minute we've got a 3/4 inch piece of plywood that we want to put this 45 degree bevel on. That means this length is 3/4 of an inch, and this length will be 3/4 of an inch. So how do I set the saw then? How do I set the fence so that I'll have a 3-inch piece from the fence to the edge of the blade, that long side? Well, it's real easy. You have to subtract 3/4 of an inch from your length. All right. Why subtract? Because this piece sticks past the edge of the blade, and therefore this fence has to be closer so that this top is 3 inches. All right. Another way to put it is if I set this thing straight up and down and set it to 3 inches, then when I lean this over, this would cut 3 3/4 inches because of this extra 3/4 inch piece here. So, I want to come in here, I want a 3-inch piece. I'm going to subtract 3/4 of an inch. So I should set my fence to 2 1/4 inches. If I do that, I will get a 3-inch wide piece with a 45-degree bevel on it. If we come in here and want to try to do a different angle, then that requires some geometry and some trigonometry. So let's see what we can do about that. Let's assume for a minute that we're going to start with a triangle that has a much flatter or much straighter curve on it. Pretty bad triangle. Let's say we want 15 degrees in here. This angle is still 90, and this angle is 75. All right. So I want to know how long this edge is right here, so I can subtract that from the overall length of my board. Gee, how do we do that? Well, I know this edge and I know that edge. This is called the adjacent edge, adjacent to where our cut is going to be, or our angle we're interested in, and this is the opposite edge. And if you remember anything about trig, the opposite side over the adjacent side is the same thing as the tangent of the angle. All right. So how do we work this out for the opposite side? The opposite side is going to be the adjacent side times the tangent of the angle. And somebody says, well, how do you do the tangent of the angle? It's really no big deal. You've got a function on your calculator to do that. So let's assume this is, again, a 3/4 inch piece of wood, and we've got a 15-degree bevel we want to put on there. So the A is 3/4 of an inch. And then we're going to do it, multiply it by the tangent of the angle we're interested in, this base angle, which is 15 degrees. So I'm just going to take my calculator. I've still got my 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to find out what the tangent of 15 degrees is. All right, so I'm going to get my phone out, pull up my calculator, and let's see here, calculator. Got my calculator up, and I want to make sure this is my calculator, and we can have a couple different numbers up here. I want to make sure this is in degrees. All right. If it's not, you'll get the wrong answer. So I'm going to put in the tangent. Oops, I'm going to clear this. And I'm going to put in 15 degrees and take the tangent of it. All right, so if we're going to go 15 degrees and then take the tangent of it, that is 0.26. That was make it 0.268 to be a little bit more precise. And then we're going to multiply that by 0.75. That's 3/4 of an inch. So I need to let that overhang 200 thousandths of an inch. Or we could even call it 201 thousandths of an inch if you want to go that far, but that's far beyond what you'd be able to measure. Gee, what's 200 thousandths of an inch? Well, I don't know. It's less than a quarter and more than an eighth. All right? Because a quarter is 250, and an eighth is 0.125. So we're going to have to find out some way to find out what that is and see how close we can get to that actual measurement. If we look at this, 7/32 and 3/16, 7/32 is just a little bit more than this, and 3/16 is just a little too small for this. So if you set it, 7/32 and 3/16 is a 32nd apart. The difference in these two numbers is 1/32 of an inch. So we're getting down to the 64th of an inch. If you move this out to 3/16 of an inch and bumped it just a little over, you'd probably be good enough. All right? You're not always going to come out with the exact numbers. But luckily, when we're doing word working, if we can get to 1 1/32 of an inch, we're doing a really good job. To make things a little clearer, I went ahead and drawn out a number line here, and I marked it out in every 50 thousandths of an inch. So if you look at what we've got here, here's 0.1 inches, 0.15 inches, right here is 0.2 inches, and that's the number we're really interested in. That's what our calculations said we should set the saw to. So how are we going to do that? Well, if we go 3/16 of an inch, that's about that far. That's 6/32. 7/32 will put us over here. So if you look at that, 0.2 is basically in the middle between 6/32 and 7/32. All right. Of course, 6/32 is 3/16. All right. So I basically need to go like a 64th over 3/16. All right, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to take my 3 inches and I'm going to subtract 3/16 from it. Now, if I subtract 3/16 from it, I've not subtracted quite enough. And my board will be a little bit too long, so I need to subtract some more. And if you see this, this is a 64th difference between these two. Excuse me, not between the two, it's a 32nd difference between the two, but I'm short on this side by about a 64th, and I'm short on that side about a 64th. All right, because it's in between. So I'm going to bump my mark just a little bit inside the 13/16 mark, and that'll give me basically right on. All right, I could do that. I could come back and sand that much off of the bevel to make it exact if you want to get it exact. One of the things we've seen on the previous page is how to set this saw up for a 3/4 inch board. The problem we get into with this is most plywood is not 3/4 of an inch. Let's say you're doing plywood. It's actually 23/32 of an inch. All right. So this number is not going to be exactly right, and we're going to have to make some changes for it. If this is 3/32 of an inch and we subtract 3/4, that's actually going to make this thing a little bit short, so we don't want to go quite that far. But what I've found out in most of the things I've cut is if you just subtract 3/4, it's going to be close enough. All right. Same thing over here. You come over here, you take this measurement. If you can get down to a 32nd of an inch in cutting wood for furniture or anything like that, or some kind of project you're doing that's not furniture-wise, let's say a speaker cabinet, that's going to be plenty. If you can get down to a 32nd of an inch, the glue will fill that gap. If you want to go further, go ahead and bump the bump the fence on the saw just a little bit. That'll fix you up. So I hope you've got some idea at least of how to go about setting up a saw to do a bevel cut. Stay tuned for more.